Neat.
Yeah.
Just make sure it works.
We didn't rehearse this, so we're figuring this out as we go.
We totally didn't make the slides last night.
That is so much further ahead than how I usually make slides. So yes, this is not necessarily talking about JavaScript, but we are both front-end engineers, and Matt is the original founder of DenverScript. So,
back for more punishment.
Yep. Yeah, so we wanted to talk about leadership. This is kind of our first time speaking since COVID, really, especially in person. So yeah, we're just going to kind of dive into it because we only have so much time. Okay, sweet. First up is just kind of like us talking about how we got into leadership and who we are as people. Matt, you want to start?
Oh, the year was, we won't go that far. So I've been an engineer for 18 years, I think. And some of you have actually worked with me, and some of you have just been here a lot, so thank you everyone for coming out. So I've been very active in the developer community. I've been giving talks. I've been running this meetup for 9 years until I couldn't take it anymore. CJ and Cass were kind enough to take it off my hands. And you know, I got into management because I saw an opportunity at a job at a startup, and we had our VP of engineering. He had 28 direct reports. And it was like, you're the VP of engineering, how do you get anything done? And it was a very flat org, and they're like, flat org. And I asked them, I was like, hey, I was always interested in being a manager. One, do you think that's a good idea? Two, would that help you out? Three, if I fucking hate it, can I not do it anymore? And he was like, oh, thank God, here's your people go. So he gave me some training, so I did get some tutelage, and a lot of it was reading books and talking with our leaders, and then realizing a lot of that didn't actually prepare me. That helps. But yeah, then well, you know, we won't go too deep in it because we will talk more about it, but I am now a recovering manager. I am now a staff engineer at Aetna Health, so I am only a few weeks post recovery, so give me time, be gentle.
Yeah, and let's see here. I've been an engineer for about 14 years now, but I taught myself HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in high school, so I could say I've been an engineer since like 1996. Spent a lot of time in design back when webmaster was a job title, and like just kind of organically stumbled my way up through the ranks. All the way from entry level to senior engineer to staff to principal to tech lead, and then in 2021, we're going to go with that, 2021, a fellow connection in the industry referred me to a recruiter. They were hiring for an engineering management role. I was working for the federal government, which meant that I was doing nothing. And I decided I wanted to try something different, so I became an EM. It was for an outdoor company, and so it seemed like a really good natural fit in terms of interest. And now I'm a senior engineering manager for a startup called CertifID. We do fraud prevention in the real estate space, which is actually way more interesting than I thought it would be. I am still a manager. I have not yet decided to step laterally into it.
Awesome. This is me, unfortunately. So, what the fuck is leadership? And sorry, I am going to be staring at my notes quite a bit here just because I don't remember everything I was planning on talking about. So, leadership is definitely not a title. Everyone thinks it is, but it's really just like an actual mindset, because you can be a leader in being an engineer, being an actual manager, working and organizing tech communities. Like, leadership is a mindset. It doesn't mean it's part of your job title. You really think about like how you can best serve the people, and also like thinking more from company interests. Secondarily, we'll say that. Because you need to put your people before yourself and the company. My opinion. My company will probably say that's not correct, but fuck you. Standing up for what is right. By that I mean, like, this could be anything, right? Like, I've had bad HR policies come to play where I'm like, not going to do that because that's not what's right for my person. Scope creep, like your engineers are telling everyone like, hey, this is now 50% bigger. Making sure you don't fight for them to say like, no, we're not just going to shovel that shit in there, like we're going to do this properly. So kind of doing that, the kind of lesson I've learned in that is like, don't be don't be afraid of getting fired for doing the right thing. Because I would gladly get fired from my job if that meant I did what was correct instead of fucking something up. Ego has no place in leadership. Like, you need to be able to come up and just straight out say like, I was wrong, my bad. But more importantly, how you're going to address whatever is the issue you've now found yourself in, and also how you plan on remedying it in the future and preventing that from ever happening again. Also, delegation. This one's kind of forefront because I've had someone come to me and they're like, you know what, I thought about being a manager, and we started giving them some responsibility to see how they would do. First thing that person did was delegate every damn thing that we ever gave him. I was like, that's not how leadership works. Like, you should not be, you need to be able to do the things that you're asking other people to do. Like, just like he didn't even try, he didn't lead by example, he didn't do any of that stuff. He just immediately said like, oh, Matt said this, you do it. And just started pointing it to people, and that was immediately like a red flag. Tried to give that person some, tutelage on that, and failed 2 more times on that. So think about that beforehand. Anything else about leadership you want to point out?
Nope.
Go.
Nailed it. All right. Yes. All right. So now let's talk about the other side of it. What the fuck is management? So since I'm still the manager, I'm going to talk about this one. I'm also going to go with the notes. This little plus signs. I think that. Yes, it makes the text bigger. Look at that.
And that's why she is in leadership. So.
Always think of kind of. So management, the way I think about it is like you are directly responsible for the outcomes of individuals, of projects, of processes, and or of teams. Like, you are that directly responsible person for ideally the success of a given group or a given situation. And you also kind of get to be the one to own, find opportunities in, and grow from the failures. This most likely means that you're going to be, as an engineering manager, managing a group of people. Usually between 3 and 7 people. I'd say like anything less than 3, and it gets more into tech lead territory because less than 3 individuals just isn't going to need the same like volume of special care and feeding that a higher volume of people will. And like more than 7 people, and like you will end up dead, or like this guy who had, what was your height?
22.
Yeah, 22 direct reports, ladies and gentlemen.
And also PO and PM.
Yeah. 3 to 7, sweet spot. I currently manage 6 individuals, all the way from entry-level engineers to staff engineers. Everybody has completely different personality types. Everybody communicates different. I have to communicate with them differently. I have to understand what motivates them. There's a lot in there. I'll be talking about that more in the nuts and bolts in a little bit. The group of people you manage, whether they're engineers, designers, product people, whatever, like, they could be cross-functional. It could be like a skills complete team where there's some back-end people, some front-end people, some DevOps, some QA, some designers. It could be a single discipline. When I was a web manager for Outside, I had 3 front-end engineers, 3 back-end engineers, and then 1 guy who was just like given to me that was sort of orphaned, who specialized in Drupal, God bless him. And so it just depends. Like, a lot of this depends on the size of the company, it depends on team composition. Some places want managers who have worked specifically in that tech. Like, I would probably not be able to go in and manage a group of like iOS or Android engineers and be successful because I know nothing about mobile app development. Whereas one of those people might not be able to come in and manage a group of web engineers, someone who specializes in security, someone who specializes in data. Having that empathy, I think, makes a big difference. I found that to be really helpful in my career, even if I'm not going into the code for the team that I am managing. If I can simply understand the abstract of what they're dealing with, it makes me way more effective. Or I at least can kind of like bullshit my way through it and not sound like an idiot. The other part with being a manager is like the problem solving becomes table stakes. I have worked with people on a peer basis with me who come to the table with problems, never with solutions. I give this feedback also to my direct reports all the time of don't just come with an issue, like what do you think is going to solve that? Who, or even just like who should we talk to? Like starting with something. With management, the shape of the role changes a lot, and you have to be able to solve problems for your people. I can't go to my VP of technology or my CEO and just say like, hey man, we're getting like crushed with support issues. They're gonna be like, okay, fucking go do something then. I'll be like, oh, okay. So trying to be like very solution focused, it's like spot a problem, solve it. It's really similar to coding. You're just not writing code necessarily to solve a problem. It's solving problems using it, applying a different paradigm to it. I try to like draw from my experience, use that to like drive direction, be a hype person for the team. And so if you think about it, right, when we're solving problems with code, with projects, there's a lot of like, we're looking to like design a product to bring us a lot of like the what and the why. Managers deal a lot with the how. How are we going to accomplish it? How many people do we need on this project? What are the milestones? How are we going to get this done? And then like, what does success look like? And so it's like, there's kind of what I have found, and Will Larson talks about this a little bit in his blogs, if you know who that is here at Staff Engineer. He thinks about engineering in like 4 different layers. There's the strategic layer, which is what executives do. CEOs, VPs, people like that, typically. Not always, but quite often. Orchestration is the next layer. That's where like VPs and directors tend to come in. They're the ones who are kind of like, okay, here are the levers we need to pull. Here's the stuff we need to do. Then there's tactics, and there's implementation. So engineers, designers, folks like that, they're charged with implementation. So managers usually, especially if you're managing individual contributors, live that tactical layer. Like what are the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month things that you need to do in order to realize a strategy, get to an outcome, deliver a feature. Also, like, you end up in a lot of goddamn meetings. Like, I was in 10 meetings today. Most of them one-on-ones or things that I had to be fully present for. And they do this like for visibility. It sucks. So here we are.
I don't miss those.
Whoops. Okay. All right, now we're going to talk about growth trajectories, like especially in the upper echelons of engineering, moving through from senior to tech lead to staff to principal, kind of demystifying and being where it goes. Go for it.
This is your one actually on this first one.
Is it?
Yeah, you were going to get the basics.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about senior and tech lead.
No, this is probably when you write things the night before. We don't practice. I forgot. You're right.
Now you're doing fine. Just to circle back.
I just died a little bit. So yeah, Morgan and I have actually, both of us have worked in all these different levels. I guess technically you've been principal, I've been a senior acting as a principal. Anyways, senior and team lead, like, we all know what a senior engineer is, right? Like, you are usually the go-to person on the team. You are always coming up with solutions, definitely talking towards like what the scope is going to look like, what are some of the caveats, you're mentoring your junior developers, and you're also like trying to be, like you're trying to be active, and if your company has like a web guild, which is essentially just a meetup for, those nerds of that section, so like just web developers meet and we talk about web things. So like you're usually bringing up context for those of like, hey, there's some cool tech I think I've seen, like let's talk about that, or just bringing things to the larger organization to help start driving that technology. Then when it comes to like a team lead can look different at every company. I've been a team lead several times at different companies, and every single one's been different. But essentially, like, you are like 50% manager without direct reports, and then 50% IC, but expected to usually get 100% IC work done.
Don't do it.
That's right. Or, for some companies, like, I was, like, my first management role at this current company I'm was at, which was the third time I was a manager. I was a team lead, a manager, and an IC. No, don't do that. Essentially, I ended up sucking at all three of them and never being good at them. But the team lead is usually helping drive the vision for the team, trying to keep all the stakeholders in sync and making sure that basically things run smoothly. So you're, again, a dev without manager responsibilities without actually having direct reports. So, staff and principal.
Sweet, yeah, so staff and principal. So for those of you who aren't fully aware of like the shape of these roles, like the way that roles expand as you mature through your career can move in a bunch of different directions, and in staff and principal's work it's really interesting. I didn't know this when I was a staff engineer. Like, Will Larson, I never heard of the fucking guy, like staff engineer was not a book. I don't even think staff engineer's path was out yet. I became a staff engineer in 2016, and I was like, cool, I get more money, and they're going to send me around the country, and I got to go to like India and get food poisoning, and it was great. But as a staff, the shapes of the problems that I began to tackle got not necessarily harder, but different. When I became a staff engineer, I coded a lot less. Instead, I was talking to teams, I was solving problems, I was changing how our company interviewed engineers, I was mentoring a ton of people, and that kind of cascaded into principal, which at the company I was at the time in telecommunications took more of like a directorship shape. So I was basically a majority stakeholder on a product team, and I was there to like drive the direction of video products using like high fidelity prototypes and doing a ton of research, a ton of R&D, and helping drive that direction. And even at that time, I didn't really get what a principal was. Like looking back, if I were to do one thing different during like that entire phase of my career, it would have been to get more curious about what seniority in an individual contributor career trajectory looked like. Because now as a manager, I'm like, number one, I need to send apology letters to most managers I've had in the past, because I was kind of a pain in the ass. But the other part is that I have now tried to basically close that loop with a lot of people that I manage directly, or even people that I like mentor or just like talk to. If you see me on Denver Devs, like if you ever corner me in the career advice section, like I will run my mouth forever talking about like career trajectories and how things change and what they look like. And so, like, the amount of code started to fall off, but the complexity of the problems like really ramped up. So things like solving architecture problems, complex integrations. Matt was talking about how he had somebody on his team where they were exploring him becoming a leader, and the dude just like automatically delegated everything away, thinking that's what a good manager does. I learned as a staff and a principal that like good effective delegation was key to my success. So that way I could focus on bigger picture problems, but I could also bring other people along for the ride to create redundancy in knowledge sharing, as well as allow me to focus on certain aspects of a solution without necessarily having to get like super deep in certain types of details, like say building components or styling stuff. It was great to be able to hand that off to somebody and then also be able to show them like what the architecture is. And that way too, I wasn't working in a vacuum all the time, because it does like get kind of lonelier and lonelier the higher up you go. I think like being a manager especially is pretty lonely sometimes. Like I can't connect with people on my team the same way that I used to when I was an individual contributor and a programmer. And it kind of even got that way with staff and principal, because the problems that I was solving was just different, and I was effectively more or less kind of a team of one. And so I had to take the initiative to go out, find people who were interested in what I was doing, or just like constantly talk about what it was I was working on. And so like career shape really shifted. The other thing that kind of happens with staff and principal is something that Will Larson talks about called archetypes. And so this also applies for like engineering leadership. I work with a leadership here right now, and he is way more knowledgeable, there's the word, of the tech of the company I work in than I am, because he used to be a principal, worked his way up into being an EM. And so he understands the architecture intrinsically, the services, the integrations. I came in as an engineering manager. I haven't written one line code, submitted one pull request to my company. So if I have a question about what happens there, I go to him. It means that he can coach his people differently. So he can talk to them about a coding problem, he can pair with them. I cannot, unless it's front-end specific. But what I can bring to the table that he doesn't necessarily have the experience in yet is really talking to people about career growth, understanding them more specifically, going through coaching sessions, those types of things, and then also kind of running the team from a higher level. Again, spotting problems, figuring out how to solve them in a way that's scalable and has really good outcomes for the team. And so it's these jobs, the archetypes really kind of dictate what the shape of your role looks like. So tech lead is one of them, so someone who does spend a lot more time writing code, say 60 to 90% of your time over mentoring or running meetings, doing orchestration things, building strategy. Another one is the architect, usually staff and principal, architecture is a T-shaped role within that. People who are problem solvers, I love doing that, people who are essentially seek and destroy, just go solve a bunch of different interesting problems at a company that don't perfectly fit into somebody else's bucket. And then the person who's considered kind of the right hand. I had a senior engineer at a previous job as a manager who was the right hand. If I was out, he ran our meetings, he could report back to leadership on status of projects, he checked in with people, he could help drive direction. People like that, incredibly important. And so this is one of those things that as people mature in their careers, thinking about what's your flavor? What do you bring to the table that you really want to flex and capitalize on as you grow as an individual contributor? Did I miss anything?
No, I think you got it all. Also, I started the clock late, so I think we're about 20 minutes in.
Oh, okay, sweet.
And we're on slide 9.
All right, we're going to run through it. Great.
Hey, guess what? It's you.
All right, I get to keep talking. All right, so I'm going to talk about how being an engineering manager specifically sucks and is also amazing. This is where we get out of the abstract and talk more about specifics. Being an EM is by far the hardest job that I've ever had in tech. It's not the hardest job I've had ever, but it is the hardest in tech. It drains me socially, emotionally, and physically. There are some days where I finish work and all I can do is lie very, very, very still in a very quiet room for an hour. So there are days like today where I have 10 plus meetings. Some weeks I'm in 30 hours of meetings and half of them feel completely fucking pointless. And also you don't get the dopamine of releasing a feature. The work feels kind of endless in that way. And so something that I have figured out is to find my intrinsic motivators. What gives me the dopamine? Is it checking in with people and finding out that they got movement on a skill, whether that is a soft skill or a technical skill. And the other thing is it is part of being the rising tide that lifts all boats. I like building up people around me. I would rather hang my hat on that than hang my hat on just making myself great. I like making the people around me great. This is not the same for everybody, but this is what drives me, and that's why I've kind of been able to sustain for the last 2.5 years in people management. Do you want to talk about the above and beyond part?
Exactly. So, just show of hands. Who here works at a company that does mid-year, end-of-year reviews, performance reviews? Okay, surprisingly only a few. Or if you've ever been a part of it, how many have done the 1 through 5 scale? Yeah, where a 3 means you're a rock star, right? You're doing your job, you're doing it well, fucking killing it, man.
But you're 3.
But you're 3. 3 is amazing. How do we get a 5? You don't. Then why is it there?
We only got one of those.
So to kind of give you an idea of and there was a lot of things at play, being at a really big company, my boss had changed, a whole bunch of things had changed. But I had, even before the beginning of the year, before I had 22 direct reports, I still had 18 reports, and 2 teams instead of 3 teams. But one of those teams I created. It was a team that we had a component library. It had gone, people used it it was throughout our entire app. But the team that used the management, they're we're going to create the next version. 2 years later, and we're like, where's the new version? They're like, we're like 3 years away. And it's like, so we still need to maintain this, got it. So created a team for this, got funding, all this stuff for it, and we did all this work. It was only supposed to live for a year, this team. The team was so successful, they requested we do a second year of the team. So not only coming in and seeing a need, it's going way above and beyond a manager's job to see hey, we should create our team for this, let's hire for all this. That's usually director level stuff. And to also means I didn't have a product person, I have a scrum master, I was the EM, the PO, and the PM, so I was going out and figuring out what worked, what roadmaps looked like, all this stuff, while managing another team. So 18 people plus all that. I got 3 this year. And they were
rockstar.
And they were surprised when I said, I'm done. So that's why I moved back to staff. I was like, you know what? A lateral move, no change in my pay, inherently a shitload less responsibilities. Sign me up. Sounds great. Kind of like being a teacher, you do not get into this for the accolades. It's not new and shiny. You don't do this for yourself. You do it for the other people you're serving, right? So, sorry, I went on a rant there.
No, that's great. Love the romance. All right, so let's talk about some of the good stuff. Because most of the time I feel like I'm a therapist, a life coach, a scrum master, a code reviewer, a business strategist, and an event planner, and probably a whole lot more things. But I also do it, like I said, I love building up the people around me, but the other part is what I would call the egoless power trip, where I do get to make decisions and drive direction. As an individual contributor and a programmer, I largely felt powerless to affect real change in a company. So your mileage varies depending on the company. But I currently work for a 75-person organization. I am one of 2 EMs. I have 1 boss. And so if something sucks, I get to change it. I get to help prioritize things. I get to talk directly to my product manager, who is more of a guide versus a top-down environment. I get to actually shape and preserve the culture of my team. Watching people get raises and promotions is fucking awesome. I do not have children, but I imagine it's like watching your kid take their first steps, or just seeing somebody get a milestone. I know Matt said that one time he got somebody a huge cost of living adjustment.
35 grand raise, and it was more than they expected, and their eyes and jaw actually dropped. I was sick.
Yeah. I've gotten to do the same thing. I got collective raises for all the senior engineers in a company I worked for in the past, got everybody re-leveled. That kind of shit feels really good. And then people on my team started making more than I did, and that was okay. They deserved it. And I knew that my energy at that point was better spent advocating for my people than serving myself. They did amazing work. And I know that not every manager does this. I've never had a manager go to bat for me on that one. I really wanted to be that person who did a better job than what was done to me in my career. So that felt great. And watching people have these aha moments, watching them get unstuck. Being able to just give somebody some basic fucking advice. I turned my staff engineer onto the Todoist app. And he was like, dude, this is great. This is helping a ton. I've been watching entry-level engineers grow and run projects. It's so cool. And then the last part really with why it's fantastic is I've learned a lot of valuable life lessons by being a manager that I would have learned eventually, but probably much slower. This was a hyper-growth trajectory for me as a person, where I learned a lot about time management, or you're going to get eaten alive. I learned a lot about how to prioritize work, how to communicate very well, very succinctly, get a point across without being an asshole. How to set and achieve goals, how to guide other people in that, managing stress for myself, managing stress for teams, for peers, for even people who didn't even report to me, strategic thinking, and public speaking. It helps a lot. This is you.
Welcome. Reasons not to become a manager, or wait. So, you should not go into management if you are power hungry, egocentric. I think I kind of mentioned that before. It's a thankless job. Oh shit, I mentioned that before too. You're gonna know some themes. But basically, you're going to bust your ass and you're going to be asked to do more, and you're not going to be thanked for it, and usually other people are going to get the credit or anything like that, but again, that's not what you're here for, right? More direct reports does not equal more important. Like, I had the most direct reports out of any manager in our company, well, on our side of the organization. And it wasn't because I wanted it, it was just because they kept giving me the hardest problems and I did okay at it, so they're like, yeah, you can probably handle that too. So also, it's not in my notes, but if you don't know how to say no, don't become a manager because
You're gonna have a bad time.
you're gonna have a bad time. Do not become a manager if you don't know what the fuck empathy is. For Christ's sake. I mean, this is like the biggest thing I think why Morgan and I become managers is because we've had shit managers most of our careers. And it's those very few that you see, and I think it's like Steve Jobs way back when made a video where they were like, we found out the best managers were the ICs because they knew what a bad manager was and they knew what their other people needed. So like, for myself, that was one of the reasons I became a manager. It was like, well, fuck it, no one else is gonna do it. I guess I'll do it and I'll do it better, I think. Damn, ego, that didn't work. So you're worried about the company's bottom line over your people. Do not become a manager if that's how you think, because you should be putting your people before the company. And I will definitely be talking about examples about that in a different slide where we have lots of fun stories. Also, Morgan kind of talked on this, money does not equal more just because you're in management. Like, pretty much you're like a lateral version of a engineer. Like, level 1 manager's like a senior manager's like a staff, and so on and so forth. Like, it kind of equals out that. So a lot of people think, all right, manager, God, they must make so much money. It's like, mostly the people who report to us make the same amount or sometimes more than the actual manager. You're not interested in developing people. That ain't gonna work. Because if your people are not improving, they're not going to be happy because they're going to feel stifled in their growth. No one's investing in them. Why the fuck would they stay? So that's going to add to your attrition. And attrition is a bad thing if you didn't know. Attrition means people left your company if you don't know what attrition is. I had to learn what attrition was after the first layoff I was a part of. No, it was not Grafsy. It was a company before that. Also, you enjoy throwing people under the bus. Don't be a manager if you enjoy that. Again, this is going to be my theme that I keep playing out there is people first. Your people are always first. You need to be able to say, like, I fucked up, or I'm going to take responsible for this, or I'm going to, like, maybe I'm not responsible, I'm going to go fix it. Like, we're here to create solutions, not more problems, and not play the blame game and throw people under the bus. Miss anything?
No buses.
Yeah, buses.
Yeah, I mean, RTD in the city sucks, no buses.
Sorry if you work for RTD.
Yeah, sorry. All right, so now we're going to talk about career navigation. Let's say that even after all of this, you're like, I think I want to look at doing this next. What does that look like? You're going to feel like 3 kids in a fucking trench coat for a while. The imposter syndrome is ridiculous. And also, like, this decision is not something to be taken lightly. It usually is a 2-way door. Like, if it doesn't work out, after a while you can sign off from that. But I'd say, like, minimum time commitment realistically is 2 years of being a manager, whether that's at the same company or even 2 different companies. Part of this is because I don't know how many of y'all have had managers change on you over like a 3, 6, 9, 12-month time period. That's a lot. You have to rebuild trust and psychological safety with people. I hate losing or having people move teams on you for the same reason. It's just a pain in the ass. I've now been through 3 bosses this year alone. They're all executives. It's a lot. I just reported to the CEO last. That was a mindfuck. He's a good person, but reporting to the CEO is hard. So I think like at least 2 years, like 1, if you really hate it or you're just really struggling and it's a better decision for you to step away from it due to your mental state, how effectively you can develop your team, stuff like that. Also, like, the environment matters. Like, if you're thinking about doing this somewhere, like, is it a startup, is it a big corporation, what's the team size, what's upper leadership like, what's the dynamic, is there trust, is there psychological safety? That matters a lot. Managing at a big corporation is probably going to be very different than at a startup. We were both EMs at like completely different size companies, and ran into similar problems but also different problems, especially when it came to like how much change we could affect. I'm at a startup, I can do a lot of stuff. You can't necessarily. You have layers and layers and layers of stuff.
Screaming into the void.
Yeah, exactly. I can scream at people. So one thing you can do is like find a bridge role from a practical advice perspective. Like tech lead, like what Matt was talking about, is a potential bridge role to allow you to gauge your appetite for this type of work. Like you can start with just mentoring folks, take on a couple of mentees, start to work with them, or find a staff or a principal engineer or even an EM or a director at the company you work for and just ask to talk to them, maybe even shadow them on some tasks. Have them talk to you about what their day-to-day, or usually like more like week-to-week and month-to-month looks like, because day-to-day is a little too granular. And then really just like look for those opportunities inside of your organization to grow as a leader. Like what Matt was talking about, leadership, it's not a title. It's not. It is a mindset. I know lots of people who have manager in their job title who couldn't lead like one Girl Scout out of the woods with a fucking map. It's terrible.
Yes.
Yeah. So looking for opportunities in your own org for any kind of growth usually is a lot easier, especially with this kind of move where you're stepping laterally onto a different track. It gets harder if you want to look outside of your org. It generally, I got lucky in that I was able to find an EM role, having never been an EM before, but I've been a tech lead. So that was kind of my bridge into becoming an engineering manager. I was also a mountain bike coach, and I was able to kind of like take a bunch of those lessons and turn them into leadership lessons. I'd also been like deeply interested in leadership for about 3 years before that. So I started really just embracing the mindset long before I became a manager by title. The last part I'll talk about is like, the EM role is usually pretty damn squishy. Individual contributors, engineers, designers, like the shape of the role is usually pretty well defined, the guardrails are there. EM can get weird. Like this job can very quickly become a dumping ground of all the shit that other people don't want to do that isn't clearly spelled out in their current job. So that is something to be cognizant of.
We're at the 30-minute or 30-inch.
Sure. Yeah.
We're going to start speeding through some of these just because we're getting tight on time, but our way around, how to navigate from being an EM back to an IC. One back to imposter syndrome. You just spent 2 years not coding. Shit. Yeah, I've already made some really stupid mistakes where I'm like, oh, I meant it, I was making sure you were paying attention. The kind of that whole, like, first of all, like, if you were like a manager trying to go back to being an IC, talk to your boss and immediately start getting that conversation out there, talking about like, hey, think leadership's no longer right for me at this time, like I'd love to go back to being an IC, and have like a plan, like talk to them about like what it is you think you can do. If there's a need, they can usually find a reason to move you, but you know, they can't just, it's kind of like hiring for another engineer. If they don't need another engineer, they're not gonna hire one. So like, make sure there's a need, you can fill that role, and also, you know, maybe do it when the company is in good standing. Don't like, when they're like, wait, so you don't work here anymore? Sick, help us out. But you know, when you have that conversation, you just gotta make sure you're ready to like have like that 3 to 8 month wait. Like it took me 4 months almost.
4 months.
It took me 4 months from having the discussion, not just my boss, but the boss above her, and he's the VP. Like it took that long just to get budget approval to get me moved off. And we even had to backfill everything lined up, but then we had to get budgeting for that. So like, that's where shit can get really weird. But if you're good at what you do and they care about you and they actually want you to stay, they'll work with you. So as long as you have a good boss you care about. And also don't wait till you're about to fucking quit, because if there's that 3 to 8 month wait, like, you know, don't wait till you're about to quit because you won't make it. Yeah, your skills will atrophy, and that's okay. Like, they know that, but that means don't wait. Like, immediately start picking up like UI.dev courses, come to meetups, doing whatever it is that you can to start leveling yourself back up. Especially if you're now supposed to be a staff engineer. Shit. But yeah, essentially just having that conversation is the biggest thing to start having it. And imposter syndrome is real. It doesn't matter what job and what role you're going into. If you don't have imposter syndrome, I feel like you're probably living in a very weird world.
I want to know your secrets if you know.
Yeah, I actually would love to know that. Cool. Now we get to talk about all the fun, weird shit. Do you want to go with your first one?
I'll go first.
Sure.
Okay, so this is just like some random stuff that has come up as managers. We're not going to give names of companies or individuals. We're going to abstract them out a little bit, because they might see this on YouTube later and be like, ooh. I wish you guys something like that, right? So a couple like really interesting things that have happened to me as a manager that are like challenging stories. The first one is that I hired somebody at my last job. He'd applied to our company 5 times over a 2-year time period. He came in as an internal referral in the final time that he came on with us. And I remember he was so excited to work for us that he cried in his final interview with the director because he knew he made it. 4 months later, the company decided to lay him off. I was told about this the night before, and I was told expressly, you are not allowed to tell this person that they're about to get let go. And I don't think I slept that night. The next day, he sent me a Slack at 9 a.m. when these things tend to happen at companies, and he was like, hey, I'm being let go right now, what the fuck's going on? And I didn't know what to say, and then all of a sudden, Slack account was deactivated. Fast forward 4 months later, and I was giving a referral to another company for him, and I almost broke down crying. That guy was amazing, and he had meant a lot to me, and losing him was just a punch in the gut. Fast forward to now, he's rehired for the same job at the same company because they laid off too many people and they needed some backfills. So he now has his job back, but a job title up and like $30,000 a year more. And I told HR when they called me for a referral again, I was like, don't you fucking dare let him go this time. Hopefully they'll listen to me. Do you want to do one?
Yeah, we'll just swap back and forth. So if you remember me saying about doing the right thing, here we go. I had an employee, they were on vacation in Hawaii with their husband, their 2-year-old child. She called me in the middle of their vacation, and usually when people would text me and call me on their vacation, I'd like to say, like, there better be a good fucking reason. They're gonna call me while you're on your PTO. I didn't even get that far, she was already sobbing on the phone. Her husband died in front of her and in front of their 2-year-old son. Suddenly, he was 34. Just give you that, like, yes, this can happen at any given time. And I immediately told her, do not worry about work, do not worry about this shit, go be with your family, I am going to figure this all out. First thing I found out was we have 5-day bereavement policy. Her husband just died. She is now the only breadwinner in the family. Like, figure out in 5 days, right? The fuck? So immediately I went to my boss and I told her, I was like, this is fucked. And she's like, yes, that is fucked. I was like, here's what I want to do, and that was, we're going to do this. She had PTO. I'm like, I'm not going to have her use her PTO, and she's going to need that for other things later on. I'm just going to say she worked, because we had timesheets and stuff like that. This is not at my current company. So I was like, I just want to report she was working. Like, at least let's give her 2 weeks to, like, so we can figure this out. And eventually we got her on, like, FMLA, like federal, leave, so she can actually go and take care of her stuff. But like right there, and I went to HR, like at a humongous company. I swear it's not my same job. A humongous company, and to go talk to HR and say like, what the fuck is this bullshit? I put in a bunch of requests for it. It didn't change the policy. They're like, oh man, that's so bad. And I'm like, yeah, you're gonna do something about it? Nothing happened, but that's why the manager others are there is to take care of this kind of shit so that they don't need to worry about it. I'll stop there.
I'm going to cut mine short and do one more in the interest of time. So I'm going to talk about, so remember how Matt was talking about 5-point review processes? There is a process that managers have to go through. It is called calibration, and it is the most bullshit dehumanizing thing ever. So if you've ever had to do a self-assessment and you're like, I fucking crushed it, I am a 4, and your boss comes back and they're like, actually you came back at 3, there is this process where managers get put into usually fairly large meetings with HR and upper leadership, and you essentially have to fight for why your people are above and beyond, or not. And then you are stack ranked against other people in your team, in your company. I cried. I was told by HR that a senior engineer who had basically built out a part of our product with no help from our product owner, written up the product requirements doc, and delivered on a feature that increased our revenue by 170% was not a 4. I lost my shit. I muted, I went off camera after HR told me that I might benefit from some 9-boxing or some further training on how to better prove that people on my team are high performers. And I was like, fuck you into next week, I'm not playing this game anymore. I now work for a company that doesn't do performance reviews, and if they start doing it, I will think about leaving. So, Greg.
We just started yesterday.
Hey man, he's got to know what he bought into. It was one of the lowest points as a manager. I had spent literally an entire weekend writing performance reviews. I don't know how many of you have written a self-assessment and then your manager comes back and basically the review they gave you is like, I agree with everything you wrote. Same, 3 out of 5, great job. I fucking wrote performance reviews for my people. I try to recognize them, make them feel seen, read what they wrote. One of my direct reports cried when she read my assessment because she was like, I've never had a boss actually see me the way I am as an engineer. That was important, but the calibration process was completely fucking horrible. And that is probably like one of my lowest moments from the inside as a leader.
We're going over time, but I'll do one more and then we'll turn it over to questions. But I think this one's also really important. Also, first time I did evaluations in that big room of people, I immediately poured whiskey afterwards and called it a fucking day. It was like 1 o'clock. So, been there, don't fucking miss that. So, this one I think is important where I had an employee, we were working very hard for their senior title, they were at Dev 3, next level was their senior. The company decided to change and consolidate job titles. So, if you were Dev 3, you became senior, right? Oh, hey, you got your promotion. Think again. No, you're now senior on a broader spectrum of pay, so there's no pay adjustment. So you get a promotion. So try and break that news to your colleague. I was blunt with him, and I was like, you know what, this is fucked, dude, you should look. Like, I've tried fighting, trying to get a market adjustment, and I think that's the other thing about doing the right thing is supporting your people no matter what it is in their journey, because that's your job. You're supposed to support them, whether that's at your company, or if the company's no longer doing right by them, or they're just not right for the company, or just like in terms of like, you know, they want to do AI and your company does nothing with AI. It's like, let's figure out how to get you a job in AI. So that was the last one. We had more stories, but I guess we'll.
We can put this on the internet. We have resources if inexplicably you are still interested in becoming a manager. All right, questions.
One of the things that you said.
Wait.
Oh, here. All right. I got it.
So professional.
One of the things that you said that kind of resonated was the responsibility of a manager. But one of the things I've heard from a lot of managers that I've known as, they've said, you have a lot of responsibility and a lot of power, you know, to actually try to enforce and make some of these changes. Even with the application, you're told as a manager, you have to do all these things, good luck.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, what do you do besides drink?
Oh yeah, I am the person to ask this because his answer is drink more. Probably. So to paraphrase your question back to you, what do you do when you actually can't affect the change that you want, like for your teams or within your company?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so there's two pieces. Like, sometimes it's like being highly selective of what hill you want to die on. Like, I have basically fought for things and not shut the fuck up to the point that I basically just got upper leadership to like bend to my will and do things. Or I would just do them and then show them the results later. I've done those in the past. Like, I had my team working 4-day work weeks and I didn't tell anybody for a while, and then I showed them the results, and then the company did 4-day work weeks for an entire summer. It was a big gamble, but I went for it. Okay, so when you can't actually make traction or headway, I think there's a couple different things. There's either like, A, it might be time as a leader that if you're not being able to make the positive changes you need, that it's time to fucking skip out. If you're not being empowered to do what matters. The other part is figuring out, like, are there creative levers you can pull that can, I'm about to use, is it dying? It's dying. Where's the other mic? The spatula is failing us. All right, it's okay. So the other part, okay, did this one die too? Maybe. Okay.
You have to use your coaching voice.
No. Okay, there we go. I can use my outside voice.
No, it is a steam problem.
I'm so sorry. It's okay. Maybe. Okay, yeah, there we go. The other part is, yeah, just finding, like, basically different ways to stack the deck, I think, in order to make the changes you want. So, right, there are going to be things that are out of our control, like what Matt was talking about, like getting certain people raises who very badly deserve it. Like, at the end of the day, sometimes those things don't matter. I think when it comes to like workflow and process-related changes, those can be a little bit easier. I think it depends on kind of like who you're up against in those areas, and that's also where, like, for me as a leader, I try to get curious. So if there is pushback on certain things, I'll just start asking why. Like, why are we not allowed to try this? Or can I take a tiger team and like run with this idea? I don't know if those things help. They're a little bit broad, but those are some things that I've employed in the past when I've started to feel like powerless to impact change in my company or for my team.
And, oh yeah, do I need the mic for us? I mean, so like that team that I created, I saw a need, and I had tried for the first year as an engineer there because that happened 3 years ago. I was like, you know what, we need to start doing this. So I started working on it incrementally. Like, I would start making PRs to it even though we had no access to it. I would just reach out to those devs that still had access to it and just kept trying to make incremental changes. And by showing that, I was like, hey, I fixed something in one place, and just start getting more and more data. Like, if you want to get anywhere on making something change in your company, give them data. Like, that is the easiest way to start changing our mind. Like, one company I worked at, we didn't have web support for a lot of features, and I made a business case, and I made an entire PowerPoint and showed how much money a month they were losing by not having the same features on the website, and that got us to hire Gary. So, like, you know, just started like hiring people because they're like, oh shit, we need to actually do this because we're losing a lot of money. Money talks. So as soon as you start talking about like productivity, money, like that's another easy metric to sell them on making different changes.
Thank you so much for the awesome talk.
Real quick, like in lieu of a question, I just looked it up. The first DenverScript I went to was April 2015.
Whoa.
And so, like, both of you have given so much to the community. Thanks for coming down from Montana, where the fuck you guys live. And Matt in particular, thanks so much.